Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the second album from Chris Stapleton this year, From A Room, Volume 2. I feel I've got no choice but to start this review with this statement. I wish to God I love Chris Stapleton as much as so many of his diehard fans do, and for 2 reviews in a row, I've seen their frustration in the comments that I haven't given him the same critical acclaim that they think that he deserves. And make no mistake, I would love to be there with you. Seriously, I would. After the CMAs where Chris Stapleton picked up a few well-deserved awards, I wanted to be right there with you trumpeting his praises. He's done this again and again. But I need to be honest, it wasn't even the best Dave Cobb produced record on that ballot for Album of the Year this year. And that's the key point of frustration for me. For as good of a performer and as good as a writer as he is, Chris Stapleton has yet to bring it all fully together for me. Most because his production has never quite given him enough consistent bite, which is a persistent issue with Dave Cobb's attempts at rougher sounds, and his writing has never felt quite as meaty as some of his peers. And when you factor in distinct issues like the overextended Traveler or the painfully thin and abbreviated From A Room Volume 1, I can't quite put Chris Stapleton on the same pedestal as I would for Jason Isbell or Sturgill Simpson. At least not yet. And look, I'll make things worse for myself and say that I had serious reservations going into this album. I have never been a big fan when artists release 2-part projects within the same year at different times, especially if the sound is pretty close between the albums. It's not an issue for a guy like Eric Taxon or a band like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, because they're gonna drop 4 or 5 projects a year and they will all sound radically different. But you know what? I've had the same problem with Brockhampton, and I had the uneasy feeling I would have it with Chris Stapleton too. Because as I have said before, I'd rather have one fantastic album with all the best material than spreading the highlights across 2 pretty good but not great albums. Now, you know what? I could be wrong here. From A Room Volume 2, it could be the record that really hits greatness, so okay, did it get there? Okay, here's the thing. For an indie country insider, you're probably just as, if not more exasperated with Chris Stapleton on this project than I am. Because this is a 9-song project with 2 covers and 2 songs that Chris Stapleton has either cut with the Steel Drivers or who has given to another artist. Now this only leaves 5 songs of original new material, and all the more evidence that Chris Stapleton really should have just only released 1 album of the very best rather than split it across 2 admittedly lesser albums. But that being said, and the acknowledgement that this might be an even more stripped-back release than the last 2, with no pedal steel or fiddle at all, and only a little bit of harmonica, this was the first project where I heard the writing show real greatness where only inconsistent flashes came before. In other words, of the full-length studio records he's released solo thus far, I might actually like this one the most. I think this is a pretty great album. And here's the thing, on the surface, this is a very similar record to From A Room Volume 1, at least in terms of a lot of the tones and production. Like with that record, it can be handily split into rougher, more electric guitar-driven southern rock tunes, accented with firm bass lines and hints of harmonica, or songs that lean very heavily on acoustic guitar, very, very gentle percussion, and Chris Stapleton's voice, which, if anything, is showing more subtlety and depth with every single solo album he puts out. And as I said, it's overall a leaner set of arrangements than what we got on the last album. Even some of the tones, they can feel a little bit more brittle, and there's even less of his wife Morgane's voice contributing to the backing vocals. But you know what? Believe it or not, I don't actually really have an issue with this. And that's entirely thanks to something more subtle but deserves to be called out: the compositions. Now this is something I rarely bring up directly when talking about a lot of country music, especially when there are certain progressions that will occur time and time again. But you know what? If there is an edge that Chris Stapleton brings to these songs in particular, it's the embrace of more complex melodies and them taking a more defined role in the mix, with more minor keys to boot. And that's not inconsiderable. Chris Stapleton's got the gruffness to play to some darker material. It certainly led to some of the strongest cuts off the last 2 albums, like Was It 26 or Either Way, and coupled with greater subtlety has led to some phenomenal cuts on this album. Now sure, the swampy lick behind Hard Livin', it's not revolutionary for southern rock, even though the solos are really good, but to go to the more complex acoustic line in Scarecrow in the Garden, which is easily one of the best things that Chris Stapleton has ever written, and when you get songs like Nobody's Single Tonight and A Simple Song, or even his old cut Drunkard's Prayer, you know what? There is a darkness to these tunes. There's a way that his voice is placed just slightly back in the mix to emphasize that loneliness. That feels so much more natural for Chris Stapleton's delivery than, let's say, a slightly goofier cut like Trying to Untangle My Mind. Which, yeah, it's a fine enough song, but this is territory he's played in before. I like him going more dark because that's a little bit different for him. And that's a key point to emphasize too. For as much as you could argue that Chris Stapleton's not in territory that the Turnpike Troubadours or especially Cody Jinks haven't already trod, hell, Hard Livin' was practically the thematic arc behind the Turnpike Troubadours' last album, A Long Way to Your Heart, he's doing it pretty well here. He might have already written Drunkard's Prayer a good decade ago, but tackling guilt in the face of your own personal inadequacies or alcoholism, that's powerful and dark stuff. And it's hard not to hear the verses cut pretty deeply in the decay behind a simple song, even if it's a brighter chorus, especially when similar subject matter is played much more brightly with the opening cover Millionaire. And the framing of these situations rings as, well, darker too. The jailhouse blues of Midnight Train to Memphis, it might be kind of simple, but the details highlight poverty that keeps Chris Stapleton's character in jail. He doesn't get out on bail. And Nobody's Lonely Tonight, it doesn't even try to imply love being found in this hookup, or anything remotely sexy about it. No strings, no feelings, both plugging the memories of images of their ex-partners. It's a pretty bleak song, and it doesn't pull punches, and I like that from him. And Scarecrow in the Garden, it's by far one of the best songs that Chris Stapleton has ever written, telling a frank tale of a farmer watching the land decay generation after generation in ways that he can't really understand. The track ends with him holding a Bible turned to Revelations and a pistol, and the framing's absolutely chilling, mostly because it pulls absolutely no punches. Again, the song invites some sympathy for this man and watching everything decay beneath him to the point where he's clinging to the few things on which he can rely, primarily that land, and even that won't hold for long. But the paranoia and the desperation is subtext underneath every single word, and it's clear that he might just have an apocalyptic death wish, and that's not exactly a good thing either. It's sort of unflinching nuance that Chris Stapleton rarely ever presses, with a deft eye for detail and moral ambiguity. That makes me desperately wish he did a lot more of it, and that's what does kind of irk me a little bit from the From A Room records. You could have cut songs from both and mashed it to one genuinely excellent project that would easily stand above Traveler without needing any covers at all, hands down. So why split them up in the first place? Well, there's a part of me that is convinced it's label interference from Mercury Nashville, who between this and what they're doing with Laura and Elena seem to be trying to milk as much cash as they possibly can from artists who really deserve better. But at the same time, Chris Stapleton probably has enough clout at this point thanks to the frankly obscene number of records and months he has been on the Billboard 200 combined that if he wanted to, he could have combined this. But even putting that aside, I liked From A Room Volume 2 a lot. The first genuinely great project from Chris Stapleton solo in my view, and one that with every original song indicates an artist taking the right steps going forward, and that's thrilling to see. For me, 8 out of 10, easily a recommendation, and while I may have heard better country albums this year, I'm thrilled to finally get on board the bandwagon, because you're gonna definitely want to check this out. You won't regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, I've been pretty positive, but yeah, this was a great record. I'm so happy that it came together. And going darker is a good fit for him. There's real lyrical nuance that can back it up. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So if you want to buy the album, links in the description below, and I got the poll up there. I'm curious where you diehard Chris Stapleton fans fall on this. I'd be surprised, okay, I really wouldn't be that surprised if you guys weren't on board, but hey, I'd be happy to hear you guys if you are. Beyond that, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process and support this channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.